का कदम, ये लायन का स्टेप, मेक इन इंडिया। मैं चाय बेचते बेचते यहाँ आया, परिश्रम की पराकाष्ठा करूंगा, अपने लिए नहीं, देश के लिए जीऊंगा। किसी से आंख झुका करके बात करेंगे, नहीं हम आंख उठा करके बात करेंगे, हम आंख मिला करके बात करेंगे।
18 जवानों का बलिदान बेकार नहीं जाएगा।
Good evening and welcome to our special broadcast. Narendra Modi is going to be Prime Minister again. India handed him a thumping victory yesterday, 24 hours after that remarkable win. The BJP is moving full steam ahead. Let's bring you up to speed with what happened today, the events after counting day. The counting of votes concluded this morning, in fact, and here is the final result as it stands. 303 seats for the BJP. They've gained 21 from 2014, a clear majority mandate for Narendra Modi and his party. The Congress stands at 52, that's again 2, but marginal. They do not have enough seats to stake claim to the post of leader of opposition for the second time in a row. The Uttar Pradesh Grand Alliance, the Gathbandhan, failed to stop the Modi juggernaut in that state. They managed to secure just 15 seats, 1-5. Other parties take away the remaining 172 seats in the Lok Sabha. And here's the latest. The cabinet has passed a resolution to dissolve the 16th Lok Sabha. Just a short while back, Prime Minister Modi went to the Rashtrapati Bhavan to meet President Ram Nath Kovind. After the mega win, the first stop for the Prime Minister and Amit Shah was to the house of two BJP veterans, two leaders who were not given a ticket to contest this time, LK Advani and Murli Manohar Joshi. Soon after his visit, he put out two tweets. The first one was for LK Advani. It said, and I'm called on respected Advani ji, the BJP's successes today are possible because greats like him spent decades building the party and providing a fresh ideological narrative to the people. Prime Minister Modi sought the blessings of Murli Manohar Joshi as well. Both veterans were not given, as I said, tickets by the BJP this time. Several reports claim that the two leaders were upset with this decision. LK Advani even penned a letter, but they displayed no bitterness during today's interaction, it seems. Look at these images. What happens next? Prime Minister Modi will once again meet the President to stake claim and form the government. But before that happens, a meeting of the BJP Parliamentary Party will be called. Here the MPs will elect Narendra Modi once again as their leader. This is procedural, but this has to be done. It will happen tomorrow most likely. The Election Commission will present a list of newly elected MPs to the President. He will then officially extend an invitation to the BJP to form a government. Most probably, Narendra Modi will take oath of office on the 30th of May. That's next week. And before that, he will travel to Gujarat and Banaras next week. The loss for the Congress party is a bitter pill to swallow. And at a time when Rahul Gandhi's own political future is uncertain, some senior leaders have already sent their resignation from party posts. But the Congress could face more setbacks. The Karnataka government is in trouble, as we've been saying. There are serious apprehensions that the state government will survive. The Congress-JDS alliance managed to secure just 2 seats in Karnataka. There are also reports that the BJP in Karnataka could try and poach some Congress and JDS MLAs. Former State Minister Chief Minister Siddaramaiah has tried to put up a brave face. He claimed that the parliamentary elections will not affect their coalition with the JDS. And the story of this election can be summed up in 9 key figures. Numbers. These numbers stand out. The BJP alone has managed to win 303 seats, 31 more than the majority mark of 272. 15 BJP leaders have won by more than 5 lakh votes. That is the margin. It was a clean sweep for the BJP in 10 states and union territories across India. The party secured nearly 39% of the vote across the country, up from a little more than 31% in 2014. The BJP's vote share exceeded 50% in as many as 224 seats, more than 50% of vote share. In 15 states and union territories, BJP allies won more than 50% of the votes, that is the NDA. The BJP managed to retain nearly 82% of its seats against the Congress. This was their strike rate. It's a very grim result for the grand old party. No more grand, as one headline said in the newspapers today. They haven't been able to win even a single seat, not a single seat in 20 states and union territories. It's not just the BJP that's cheering. The DMK has reason to celebrate. They have a 100% strike rate in Tamil Nadu. They won all the seats from where they contested. But the story of this election is Narendra Modi. He's now the leader of India with the largest popular mandate in the world. Modi is the only leader to secure a convincing win in a democratic system, a win this big. Some other telling numbers show how badly the Congress has been defeated in this election. The vote share of the grand old party saw a marginal drop. It went from 19.3% to 19%, so not much loss there. But its difference with the BJP has dramatically widened from 12 to 21%. That's how far behind the Congress is now. The Congress was not able to challenge the BJP in almost all the seats where there was a direct contest. It lost more than 90% of those seats. And joining us today, our special panel, we have Andrew Whitehead, author and senior journalist. We have Professor Makarand Paranjpe. We have Walter Anderson and Lord Meghnad Desai. Thank you all for joining us once again here. We're looking at these numbers and we're looking at the vast cross-section of Indians who voted for Narendra Modi, from women to rural voters, urban voters, people across castes, people across religions, across states. So I want to say, should we revise that cover of the Time magazine from divider-in-chief to unifier-in-chief? He's brought them all together.
Well, it wasn't my Time cover, I have to
Yes,
say, divider-in-chief. And I know it rankles with people here. And Narendra Modi's achievement looks even more emphatic and impressive the day after than it did on results day. The figures that you gave, the BJP's share of the national vote, up from 31% to almost 39%. In the seats that it contested, it's 46%. In constituencies where it was a head-to-head between Congress and the BJP won in 93% of those constituencies. They saw off the Mahagathbandhan, they sustained their strength across the Hindi belt, and they made a major breakthrough in West Bengal, taking 40% of the popular vote in that state. So, I mean, there are exceptions, but Narendra Modi has demonstrated his popularity across the nation, across caste barriers, across gender barriers, across barriers of religion. I'm less convinced.
Okay, let's take that with Professor Paranjpe. Unifier-in-chief now?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I wrote about this after the Time magazine cover story. I wrote a rebuttal and I said precisely this, that if anything, he's unifier-in-chief, because we've moved from the divide et impera narrative of the British Empire, which the Congress inherited, to this grand national narrative, onward India, you know, which is a narrative which is inclusive, as you said, across caste lines, beyond the caste calculus, beyond community, the gender bias, north-south divide. Though I must say that the BJP hasn't done that well in the south of the Vindhyas, but Karnataka is an exception. And they've already got an eastern corridor all the way to Arunachal Pradesh. So I think this is a decisive mandate. And all these labels, you know, Hindu fascists or, you know, intolerance debate, award wapsi, all these labels that were attempted to be foisted on both Modi and BJP have now been comprehensively defeated.
What's your take on how colossal this win has been and how across sections people have voted for Narendra Modi? Does he still look to you like a divisive figure or somebody who's brought all these? He's transcended all the traditional barriers of Indian politics.
You're right, and among the groups that he got, which was somewhat surprising, is the youth vote. He got that as well, beside all the other groups that you mentioned. So there's something, his charisma and trust in him and the future, that obviously, has an enormous impact on many Indians. And even in the South, the BJP has established a footprint in the South, which it didn't have before. If you look at the statistics in the 3 states of the South, where it still is relatively weak, but it's considerably more than in the past, and they actually have won some seats in the South they didn't have in the past. And as I mentioned, that's the place to watch, because in fact there is a structure. The RSS has a structure in the South, which they can use for the BJP as it grows. They did that in West Bengal.
40% of the vote share.
Yes, but it was the building of that was done by an RSS Pracharak, using the RSS network to help them on that. And the same thing was in Orissa and the Northeast. I think you're going to see that in the South as well. Now, much, of course, will depend on how successful the Prime Minister is in his policy, perspectives, particularly job creation. And in the South, there is a particular problem on lack of jobs and how well he does in doing that. And we may get to the policy issue, but I think this is where his focus is going to be next, is on policies, particularly on major policies, on economics, because there is a problem.
Right. We'll come to the policies, but you also mentioned the youth vote. So if you look at the vote share, it makes for a very interesting study. The Congress's vote share from 19.3% to 19%. They more or less kept it. The Samajwadi Party has kept its vote share. The Bahujan Samaj Party has kept its vote share. But the 10 crore new voters have all gone to Narendra Modi, which is why his share has increased from a 31 to a 39%.
I think everybody is missing out that there has been an enormous change in India, partly because mobile telephony and sort of internet and all that. Even in the rural areas, people are no longer isolated or unaware of what is going on. They can connect quickly. They can see things on television. They can buy things, and so that kind of melting pot kind of thing. So Narendra Modi, I would say, is the first all-India Prime Minister. That would be my guess. He has reached every part of India that is possible to reach. And compared to, say, Jawaharlal Nehru or Indira Gandhi, there's only 2 other comparisons. And he represents a maturity about his attitude. I thought his speech yesterday was fantastic, because as he spoke without any notes, very extempore, but it is a very thoughtfully crafted speech. He knew what people were worried about. And he was saying, listen, don't worry, the Constitution is all right. I will abide by the Constitution. I'm not going to take, there's no vendetta. I forget what was said about me. Badniyat se kuch nahi karenge.
So in the first time he came to power, he said, I am everybody's Prime Minister.
Yeah.
I am Prime Minister of those who voted for me and for those who did not vote for me. And he sought to give out the same message, and he's added to his Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas. Now he also says Sabka Vishwas. So I think he's also coming from there, saying that...
Yeah. But the Sabka Vikas, a lot of people were saying during the election campaign, oh, where is Sabka Vikas? What they did not notice, that down below in the grassroots, so the effect of Sabka Vikas was felt, which is why women voted for him, why in the rural areas BJP got vote, because they had seen the benefit of electrification and toilets and all those things. And I think the analysis was very superficial. They went on talking about demonetization or GST, which I think their sort of front room business. At the back of the house are the real issues, and he knows the real issues are at the back of the house. Right. And you have to look after that.
I'm talking to someone who said that the Modi wave in 2014 began from urban India, the aspirational middle class, to rural India. And over the last 5 years, he's captured the vote share, the mind space, the confidence of rural India as well.
I think a reason for that is an issue we really haven't addressed, and that's information technology and social media, which has had an enormous expansion in India over the last 5 to 10 years. I think that's had an effect. You now have people out in the smallest, most remote village who can now look at events that are happening in India as a whole and internationally. And I think that's happening. And I think what you see in this election is one of the effects of the spread of information technology in India, and which is, I think, a really amazing development. And what that does, it undermines the power of traditional institutions, like in the caste structure. The traditional institutions no longer are the major medium of transmitting information. Information technology is.
Right. So the images that we saw today, after that campaign, a very bitter campaign, the first two leaders he chose to go and see were Murli Manohar Joshi and L.K. Advani, people who nurtured him as a political leader, who helped him grow, and then were unceremoniously, some say, taken out of the party. Do you believe that this is the beginning of the process of rapprochement from Narendra Modi?
I think it was an important signal within the party to pay respect to the elder statesmen of the party, and Murli Manohar Joshi and L.K. Advani are the two elder statesmen of the party. They're both, for different reasons, bruised. I suspect Murli Manohar Joshi is still sporting those bruises, but they're gracious enough to recognise Modi's success, and Modi and Amit Shah are gracious enough to recognise what Advani and Joshi did in terms of developing the BJP from a very, very low base. But I think it was an important symbol above all for the party. And also it's trying to say, it's not only acknowledging the elder statesman, it's a sign that he's going to bring the party together as much as he possibly can.
Right, they say you show humility in victory and grace in defeat. Is Narendra Modi, according to you, showing the way to his party leaders and his followers that the election is over and now we need to take everyone together and work?
Absolutely. I think he's building a grand consensus, a grand national consensus by being inclusive. But I think what's really important to note, it's not that we haven't had towering leaders in the past whose appeal extended across all boundaries. You rightly said Jawaharlal Nehru, Indira Gandhi, and also Rajiv Gandhi, who was popular in the south as well as the north and in the east and the west. But I think what is really groundbreaking is that the narrative, which propelled these leaders to power is totally different. We've made a decisive break with that Nehruvian consensus to a completely different narrative. And today, the RSS top brass has signaled that by saying that we have a new narrative in place, and for the first time, India has voted or backed this new narrative. I think this is something to note. And this is a decisive break with the past, because even with, with Vajpayee's NDA won, there was still an attempt to extend that Nehruvian consensus a little bit. And in 2004, people said it's an experiment. We don't know if Hindutva will succeed. But now we know that a lot of Indians have lined up behind Hindutva. And this also means Muslims, though people are saying otherwise. And it'll only unfold in the days to come. I think the party is going to reach out to the Muslims, and you will see a Muslim policy being developed from the RSS and the BJP. This is my hunch.
Yeah, sure.
I note what you say. I hope you're right, but Muslims make up 1/7 of the population of this country. If they were going to be proportionate within the ranks of the BJP parliamentary party, there would be more than 40 Muslim BJP MPs in the new Lok Sabha. As far as I'm aware, there aren't any at all, and that's quite striking.
So, I also have something to say to that. So
I just want to respond very briefly. We can't play this game anymore that only Muslims can represent Muslim interests, only Dalits can represent Dalit interests.
But in a representational democracy, you would expect everybody to be there.
Well, that's why the separate electorates of Jinnah was voted out by the Congress. We can't play that game.
For most political parties, that tokenism is gone. So I have issues with reservation when you say that women representatives can best represent women's cause. I think winnability is the new criterion for most parties and leaders to be fielded.
But the overall picture tells a story.
It does.
Listen, I thank you for saying that, because we never say there are not enough women who represent women, but we always say. But looking at the numbers of Muslim MPs in Lok Sabha, which is now 25, and it more or less has been that kind of thing. Occasionally it has gone up in the 1980s, but it's sort of back to where it was in the 1950s and 1960s. So it's partly because other parties have been frightened of selecting Muslim candidates. Congress, for example, is completely frightened of. And so, and BJP always puts up Mukhtar Abbas Naqvi whenever they have a kind of spokesperson. So I agree with as Walter said, they will develop a Muslim policy. Because RSS has also got a sort of thesis on, we're all Hindus
How to co-opt.
and with different religions. They are not like the Savarkar. They don't have the Hindutva notion. They say we are all Hindus, we are all territorial Hindus, and our religions are different. So that is, and another thing is that the Nehruvian vision was top down. This is very much working in grassroots.
Right.
It reflects what grassroots believe in.
Exactly.
I want to bring in more figures here, and that's a very interesting point you made on what he's going to do next and what kind of policies. The BJP, we know, has breached the 300 mark. With NDA allies, they control 2/3 of the Lok Sabha now, or will control if one more party joins them. The 2/3 mark allows a political party great elbow room in parliament and in parliamentary politics. It enables the government of the day, to take major decisions. What kind of decisions can they now take? They can make constitutional amendments. The NDA has won 356 seats in the Lok Sabha. It's just a few seats shy from 362. The majority mark, that is the mark for the 2/3 majority. And the BJP is now in a position to reach out to a few friends, regional friends. The party is also now in a position to win a simple majority in the Rajya Sabha. This will allow the Modi government to push bills which the opposition has been blocking over the last 5 years. The Rajya Sabha has 245 MPs, of which 241 are elected and 4 are nominated by the president. Now, to win majority in the Rajya Sabha, the NDA needs 163 seats. At the moment, they have 97. But considering this year's sweep, the BJP has a good chance to touch the 2/3 mark in the next 2 years. In the next 4 years, several states go to the polls. This includes Maharashtra. It's a very big state. Haryana, Jharkhand, Tamil Nadu, West Bengal, Kerala and Assam. Depending on the results from these state elections, this election may impact the numbers in the Rajya Sabha as well. So what can the BJP do with this kind of majority? Like we said, it can make constitutional amendments. It can then think about fulfilling some of its ambitious plans. It can take steps to remove Article 35A from the Constitution, along with Article 370. The Article 35A gives Jammu and Kashmir a special status. The BJP has promised to do away with this, but hasn't done it so far. In fact, the BJP can also undertake much-needed economic reforms, bolder steps maybe. With a 2/3 majority, it will be able to pass the land acquisition bill. 2/3 majority also gives immense power to a party, the ruling party, of course. It allows the BJP to remove a Supreme Court judge, the Central Election Commissioner, even the President of India. They are going to be very, very powerful. So, my question then is that without this kind of power, and without having to do the core things in their manifesto, the Ram Temple, 370, 35, without touching those things, they still consolidated the Hindu vote and won this kind of a majority. Do you believe that they will bother touching those things in the next 5 years?
Well, Ayodhya is before the courts, I believe, and I think that will be allowed to proceed. Article 370, which is the article which gives a nominal special status to Jammu and Kashmir. I say nominal because the actual meaning of it has been diluted greatly over the decades. There's very little actually that is different about Jammu and Kashmir. They hold elections every 6 years. They're allowed to, rather than every 5 years. They have their own constitution. They have their own flag. There's differences of terminology. That's just about it. All the things that didn't previously pertain. So the Supreme Court has authority over J&K. The Election Commission has authority over J&K, which wasn't the case when Article 370 was introduced. My sense is, I don't think it's worth their political effort. I think the response in the Kashmir Valley, where it's of iconic importance, would be fairly volcanic. And I don't think it's worth their political effort. 35A, which gives special privileges to what are regarded as the state subjects of Jammu and Kashmir, which is particularly about, I think I'm right in saying, purchasing land and voting rights in the state. Now that is also before the courts, but I think that is more likely to be acted upon.
And that's a bit different than 370 because it was passed by parliamentary act, like an act.
It is.
Which means it can be removed more easily than 370 and is much more powerful in what it says than 370, which is more symbolic. A lot of people even don't know what 35A. My wife asked me yesterday, and here's a person who follows India, what is 35A? I think they'll soon find out, but it's less known and less emotional than 370. And I totally agree with you.
And you say it's nominal. Is 370 nominal?
No, I think that these articles prevent a full and complete integration of Jammu and Kashmir in the Indian Union, which is long pending. And you know, the Jammu and Kashmir cauldron, more the valley cauldron, is kept boiling, partly because of this and partly because of cross-border support. And I think this government should, and I hope will, act decisively to bring about this integration and take whatever steps are required, whether these are constitutional,
but he said in his speech yesterday that I will not touch the Constitution.
No, but what does that mean? It means that the rule of law, if you can change, the Constitution of India has been changed several times, dozens of times, okay? And it is to be done legally, not through a fiat, not through the emergency, as Mrs. Gandhi did. That's what it means. And let's not get into scaremongering. You know, I think that I want to, you know, share a tweet that one of your anchors received, because you see what's going on is that this person says, this is a disaster for democracy. India is fast becoming an organized, centralized, authoritarian democracy, which is fascism. So,
no, I was not saying that. I'm saying that this government is going to be invested in so much power. Where do you think it's going to use its power?
No, they should
fulfill the issues that it has mentioned in its manifesto for decades?
Yeah, let me finish. They should also work towards solving this Ram Janmabhoomi Babri Masjid tangle. There are hundreds of ways to do it. There should be a grand temple there, which is a symbolic reclamation of what has happened to India and an acknowledgement, not an erasure of the violence that history, was perpetrated by Islamic invasions. Anyhow, but apart from that, obviously, all the energy of the government should not be in such emotive issues. It should be in good governance, building the economy. All of that is well known. But the point I was trying to make is that whenever BJP was close to winning, or whenever Narendra Modi was close to winning, there was always a demonization, a scaremongering, and crying wolf that, oh, when these people get power, they're going to destroy democracy. They're going to impose, a Hindu Rashtra. And let's not have a hermeneutics
I'm saying,
of suspicion.
Good governance is a given. Foreign policy, those things have to be dealt with. I'm saying, will he push with 300 MPs? If you cannot build the Ram temple, then you can never build the Ram temple. So then come out and say that's not happening.
I think that luckily, thanks to Supreme Court delaying everything, the Ram Mandir thing is going to be settled without any further fuss.
Settled?
Absolutely.
In the courts?
No, the court will give the decision about division of the land, and the Ram Mandir will be more or less where it is, and they'll release some land for building a mosque where a mosque may be built or not. I don't think that's the fact that Ram Mandir did not arise during the election campaign by any party shows that has now been put out of a controversial thing. And Modi, I think, has the statesmanship, if Ram Mandir is built, to, without a doubt, look after Muslim sentiments. That much I know. That much I'm confident of. But I think what he will use his power for is things like triple talaq.
Triple talaq is already settled, more or less.
He will but also, I think he will, the land acquisition bill, which they could not reform soon after coming, it's a terrible piece of legislation, and farmers have been demanding some freedom to be able to sell their land. Farmers can't sell their land right now. They'll do that. And then I think the 35A is actually a very interesting thing, apart from 370, because 35A makes a distinction between citizens of the rest of India. The right to buy property.
Yes.
In Jammu and Kashmir.
Or settle, yes.
And that may be modified.
Of course, it's not the only part of India where there are restrictions on Indians from outside the state buying property.
Absolutely. And I think that was done all that time long ago by the Kashmir Constituent Assembly, approved by the President. It never went through Parliament. So I think the time may have come to make it a proper bill.
There will also be educational reforms.
Then one can amend it.
That's on the
You
cards
can
too.
amend 35A, you don't have to remove it. You can say we can amend it by making a proper bill in Parliament. It will go through the two houses, and therefore, I know how this is done. So you can take a bill, amend it, and then restore it, a bunch of it, but remove the things which are really hurting the rest of India, that they don't have free access to Jammu and Kashmir like they have to any other part of the country.
Okay, so let me rephrase my question. Walter Anderson, while doing all the other things, Vikas and everything that the government promised it will do you think with this kind of majority, the Modi government is also going to push the core agenda? Because the argument that his core voter still makes is that if in a country as big as India, you do not have room to build that Ram temple where it's supposed to be built, then what are we doing?
I think a Ram temple will be built. He has said, and the head of the RSS has said, and so has the Congress leadership said, that let's let the courts make a decision, and then we'll move from there. The courts are supposed to rule on this in August. In the past, they pushed the can.
There's also mediation going on right now.
Well, that's true, but I don't think that's going to get anywhere because the various sides can't agree. And they've tried this before. Subramaniam Swamy was put in charge of one mediation effort, and he tells me that it was total disaster. They won't cooperate with each other.
That time there was somebody else there.
What's that?
I said there were other players at that time.
Yeah, but he was asked,
including Sayyid Shahabuddin,
to bring
who
people
was
together.
very
and
recalcitrant.
It didn't work. But in this case, I think it will happen. The Ram temple represents something significant in much of the Hindu mind. But I think he's going to be cautious. Let the courts rule. I think he's anticipating the courts will make a decision of some kind or another. And all the major parties agree there should be a structure. Even the Congress agrees there should be a structure there. They probably have to do something conciliatory regarding Muslims. Speaking of the issue of conciliation, I've been somewhat, amazed at how conciliatory the Prime Minister has been. We just saw his conciliatory gestures toward the two grand old men of the BJP, Murli Manohar Joshi and Advani, both who have felt kind of left out. And do you look at the praise that was given to both of them? It was incredible, the praise. They were personally visited by Amit Shah and by the Prime Minister.
The Prime Minister fell at Advani's feet.
Yes.
Yeah.
Advani was in many ways his protector in the past, and he doesn't forget people who do favors for him. And in many ways, I think that has an appeal to the Indian psyche of who they are.
Right.
Is you respect age.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he has look at his relationship to his mother. I mean, he makes a major effort to show his mother every honor that there is. And I saw yesterday his mother, what is she, 96?
She was waving.
She went out on the street, and there were two women who were trying to help her. She said, "No, walk on myself." And that's a gesture that I think has an impact on many Indians as they look at this lady and the relationship of her son to him. Now, we're going to get into policy issues, but you talked about the Rajya Sabha is soon going to have...
No, I want to say one more thing about the mother. So the pictures of his mother come out on TV, and what people take from that imagery is incredible. The kind of things they notice. So they say that we have very rich people with their children in positions of power, and then you have the mother of a prime minister who's sitting on a plastic chair in a small house, and she's not gotten any of the benefits of her son being a prime minister. She still leads the same life, and that is why he respects the prime minister. That's the kind of response that those images get.
I think so. I think many people look at that favorably. He's not playing favorites with he respects his mother and his brothers.
See, to accuse him of corruption after those images becomes very hard. It can't stick. So there's a lot of messaging in these images that you see when none of his relatives has benefited or has enjoyed the perks of office, and he doesn't have any descendants to look after. It's not a family concern.
Well, I think that is the big change from Nehruvian India. Where Nehru went to Harrow. He was educated in the UK. Indira went to Oxford. Rajiv went to Cambridge. I'm not quite sure where Rahul went, but nevertheless, you've got the
went to a
picture.
couple places.
So it's a hugely
Didn't
privileged
graduate.
dynasty.
Perhaps.
And Narendra Modi's story is dramatically different. We all know that story. And we now know that this wasn't just a one-off in 2014. He has actually He's captured the imagination of the country.
Yes,
and
yes.
he represents the political will of the country. And that's the big change. And it's such a different story than the one that we get from the Nehru Gandhi dynasty.
One more thing, since you mentioned Jammu and Kashmir and we've been talking about it, the result from Jammu and Kashmir is very interesting. So Mehbooba Mufti tied up with Narendra Modi after the last election and
Lost.
she became chief minister. And yesterday, out of the 6 seats, the NC got 3 and the BJP got 3. Mehbooba Mufti has lost
Wiped
her
out.
own seat.
She
Wiped
came
out.
third in her own seat.
Yes.
And she has put out a tweet acknowledging that her supporters have punished her for
Tying up with
the
Modi.
things that she did wrong. In other words, tying up with the BJP. In the Kashmir Valley, and the political culture of Jammu and Kashmir is very distinct. In the Kashmir Valley, there are 3 seats. All have been won by the
By
National
NC.
Conference. The National Conference is the only party, I think, which made an issue of Article 370 in the general election campaign.
both.
Omar Abdullah said he wanted Article 370 restored in full. So he wanted the full autonomy envisioned when Article 370 was drafted, which is a much greater level of autonomy than the state currently has.
So if he joins hands with the BJP, they're both done for, the regional parties then.
Omar Abdullah will. There are state elections that we expect to be held in November. They're late, but we think they'll be held in November. It depends how high the turnout is. It looks to me as if the National Conference will do very well in the Kashmir Valley, and the BJP will again do very well in Jammu, and we might face deadlock in the State Assembly, which we've had really for quite a few years.
I also want to add that Burhan Wani's associate Musa was shot dead.
Killed
So
yesterday.
the message is that if you're going to pick up the gun, if you live by the gun, you'll have to die by the gun, you know. And I think once the messaging changes, it is not difficult in 20 years to change the mindset of the valley. Somebody said yesterday it's impossible. I disagree. 20 years, you can change people's minds. It's
That's the
one
next
generation.
project they're
The
working on.
valley's been waiting a long time for a little bit of love and attention, and it doesn't feel very loved at the moment. And we
Well,
now have.
spare the stick and spoil the child.
Well, Kashmir is very familiar with the stick, and we've had since 1989. We've had 30 years of insurgency.
It will be crucial to see how the Kashmir State Assembly elections go and what stance BJP takes at that time, which is going to come very soon.
Right.
And
In fact,
that
we'll
will
look-
be the test. That will be the test, and we'll see how hard they fight on 35A.
Yes.
We'll have to wait and see. Let's also quickly take a look at what Modi has to focus on. A long list of tasks awaits the Prime Minister after he takes the oath of office. What should be his top priorities? We have some ideas. Everyone has, and we've been looking at the newspapers. Here are ours. Let's first talk about foreign policy. He started the neighborhood first policy. India needs more of it, more specifically Pakistan and China, the 2 recalcitrant neighbors of India. Yesterday's result welcomed by both Islamabad and Beijing. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan tweeted, and I'm quoting, "I congratulate Prime Minister Modi on the electoral victory of the BJP and allies. Look forward to working with him for peace, progress and prosperity in South Asia." The Chinese went one step further. Chinese President Xi Jinping wrote a letter to Prime Minister Modi conveying his congratulations, and here's an excerpt from that. "I attach great importance to the development of China-India relations and would like to work with you to guide the development directions of the bilateral relations, enhance mutual political trust and expand pragmatic cooperation and promote the closer developmental partnership between the 2 countries to a new height." Pragmatic cooperation, he says. But if we conduct a realistic assessment, India will continue to face challenges from both China and Pakistan. The new BJP government will have to find ways to counter China's growing influence. Tensions with Pakistan escalated at the beginning of this year. It'll be interesting to see if both sides make some conciliatory gestures from here on. As for the domestic issues, the first priority should be jobs. Critics of the Prime Minister say that he did not do enough on that front. They say the Indian economy is witnessing jobless growth. The government claims that more jobs were created, but the data is not available. The truth most probably lies somewhere in between. So this time, just creating jobs will not be enough. The world is grappling with new challenges. Artificial intelligence is now part of the mainstream. The challenge this time will be to create jobs that are future-proof, that are future-ready. India's economy also needs a boost. Yet again, expectations are high from the Prime Minister. The business sector is raising demands for deregulation. India's public sector banks are facing a liquidity crisis, but the Prime Minister's immediate challenge will be to boost economic growth. In the December quarter, India's economic growth fell to its slowest pace in 5 quarters. It stood at 6.6%. National security was at the top of the agenda in this election. As part of the manifesto, the BJP promised to strengthen the country's defences. It'll be interesting to see what steps this government takes in the next 5 years to do that. Besides these, the government needs to put more focus on the Smart Cities program. Infrastructure growth in India rose under Modi. More roads were built, the connectivity improved, but there's still much work to be done. In the first 4 years of its tenure, the Modi government built 73% more highways than the last 4 years of UPA 2. The government identified several smart cities. It is a project that the Prime Minister is quite bullish about, but the progress report on these smart cities can look better. India is urbanizing at an unprecedented pace. In the future, the Tier 2 cities will be as important for sustainable growth as the Tier 1 cities. Creation of smart cities will have a cascading effect on the generation of jobs. The land acquisition bill is another area where the government needs to focus on. And then there is climate change, increasingly viewed as climate emergency. There are good reasons for it. It's the single biggest issue, because neglecting it will have disastrous impact on the future of humankind, especially for a country like India. So lots to do there. Let's start with foreign policy, Pakistan and China, and the message from the Chinese president makes for interesting reading.
I think this is probably a bigger issue for this government than what's happening on its other flank, where I suspect there may be some incremental improvement, but not very much. So there is clearly an opportunity for India and China to get together much better. India remains a little bit standoffish because it's worried about China's influence, it's worried about Belt and Road, it's worried about the depth of the relationship emerging between China and Pakistan. It's also worried about the route of the economic corridor, which goes through territory which India claims as its own because it was part of the princely state of Jammu and Kashmir. But China, I think, is in a situation where it really wants to buddy up with India because China's feeling a cold wind from the States. So there's a big opportunity there, which I think Narendra Modi would be interested in pursuing.
Well, we spoke about the Wuhan spirit. One thing about Narendra Modi's foreign policy that we've discussed on this channel a lot, from non-aligned movement of Nehru's time to what they call strategic autonomy. So on the one hand, you're joining hands with Japan to counter China and Sri Lanka with that container project. On the other, you're also engaging with the Chinese at the SCO.
And that's only a couple of weeks now they're
Yes.
going to meet. And so it's going to be important as to what comes out of that, because there are two countries that are going to be a focus of Indian concern. China, of course, is one. Pakistan is the other. And I think the Prime Minister is in a rather good position. He goes with a strong electoral mandate here. He's got the leaders of the two countries have said they want to improve the relationship with India. And there are a number of ways that this can happen. Even during the wars of Doklam 2 years ago, Indian ministers were visiting in Beijing who were dealing with economic issues. It's interesting if you read the comment of the Chinese foreign policy spokesperson, because I think it was very accurate. It said, we have had problems, but on the other hand, we have an enormous economic potential. I think that's the way the Indians look at it too. We have enormous economic potential with China, but we have to be alert to the problems that the Chinese might pose. And the Chinese, it's been my experience, respect strength. And what Prime Minister Modi did at Doklam, he asserted strength. India was not going to be nibbled away, by Chinese or anyone else. And I think the Chinese respected that. And it got into Chinese press. Read the Global Times, which is the party newspaper.
Yes.
And and it reflects Chinese views of India and Modi. The last few months, it's been high praise of Modi, partly for reasons you mentioned, the geostrategic issue. But the Chinese economy is sinking as well.
Yes.
The Chinese need a place to invest and to sort of do business. And India has a huge potential. In fact, something I think that people often overlook when they talk about Indian problems, it's this country which is recognizes and is in the process of tackling the issue of infrastructure.
Right.
Huge infrastructure needs here. If you had money to invest in infrastructure stocks and bonds, India is the place to do it, because this is where the growth is going to happen. And you have a prime minister who's brick and mortar. Let's build, let's do something, you know, and now that he's likely to have...
When the Chinese come to build, they bring their own people and they bring their own money, and the locals never get jobs. You look at Pakistan,
not entirely.
You look anywhere.
Not entirely. Anil Ambani built much of his energy structure by an $8 billion loan from Shanghai Electric. $8 billion. That gave him the funds that almost nobody else had. So they have potentially a lot of money. India needs capital. They need it badly. The FDI, I just saw statistics, the FDI, which India had been the largest recipient 2 years ago at 60 some odd billion, is only half of that now.
The question is, should that money and help be coming from the Chinese? I think the fact that the Indian government stood its ground despite threats, despite repeated invitations for the BRI, is a story in itself, and that rankles with the Chinese.
I think the BRI should not be touched.
It shouldn't be touched.
By any
correct.
respectable country. No. Malaysia has gone out of it.
I agree with you.
Sri Lanka has suffered
Pakistan.
from it.
It's a death trap.
If China has surplus steel and it wants to dump on other people, they can do that with the Central Asians. I think that was important. Don't just think of China and Pakistan in isolation. It's China, Pakistan, US, Iran. India has to steer a very careful course between these two things, because the US-China tariff war, India has an interest in that. The US-Iran battle, India has a very clear interest in that. And I know my own private view is that people should stop obsessing about Pakistan. Vajpayee and Manmohan Singh and Modi, they were eager to do something about Pakistan. Except for fighting terrorism, leave Pakistan alone, neglect them for a while, and then let them come to India. India should not go to Pakistan.
I think if you strike a good deal with China, it'll take care of Pakistan.
I think that this is a great opportunity to improve relations with China without giving away much on the ground. A lot of it is only optics as well as messaging, I feel, because we know the areas where we have problems with China, including the border, including certain strategic things, and we know our economic interests. I completely agree that the one, Belt and Road is a disaster, possibly even for China. It indicates imperial overreach, and that is how these. But now to come back to your original question about the economy, I think 2019 is so different from 2014 because 2014 there was an empty coffer. The UPA had spent everything. In fact, they had overextended themselves. This is a very sound fiscal situation that India is in, though I agree that the economy is not doing as well as it was maybe last year. But I think we are much better off, than before.
It's still the fastest growing economy in the world.
Exactly.
We may think it's slowing down.
And I want to say one thing. Can I finish my point? My real point is this, that jobless growth has become a catchphrase. But can you have workless growth? It's not possible. So let's not keep talking about jobs, jobs, jobs. We have to create opportunities for work and reskill the population.
I think that's very important because
livelihood.
Demographic potential has not
we have to prepare
exploited.
them out of the permanency model. Everybody wants a permanent job.
But they came up with the skill development ministry. What happened? The
that
Indian
unfortunately
youth is not skilled. They do not have the right skills to be employed.
That was unfortunate because the minister had a much more important ministry, petroleum. So that took a back seat. I think we have to get back to that. That's why educational reforms are important. Our higher education is in a mess. I've been in this sector all my life, and I can tell you, apart from the IITs and a few IIMs, we are sitting on a colossal competence deficit. And that is because we are so afraid of excellence. We have created a system of complicated entitlements.
People graduate from there. I mean, we wrote about this in school, but I think that brain drain is still happening. They go to the Silicon Valley to build companies.
No, because
there's another question
we were
there.
more interested in extending opportunity for higher education than improving the quality of higher education.
Totally.
I don't think the issue
And
is
the
higher
complex set
education.
of
India spends too
entitlements
much
that
on
nobody
higher
can unravel.
Right.
What India needs is vocational education. That is we had an ambassador, Nancy Powell, 2 terms back, who had come from the state of Ohio, which has an excellent
We need
record
everything,
in vocational
vocational
education.
and
She had proposed it, and a lot of people agreed with her. That one of the major weaknesses of Indian education, it's not training young people to do practical things. They all want to be white-collar workers, hence going to graduate schools and that. And that's a mistake. You know, I'm told that, for example, probably the best school in India on vocational education is the Victoria Institute in Mumbai. They never have a problem in getting their graduates very good jobs because there's an enormous demand in this country for skilled workers. Not so much for people like this, but skilled workers who wear blue-collar stuff, they have a demand for, and that they need to have, but there's a cultural problem. Cultural problem is that many Indian parents think that it's degrading to send their children to a place where they're training how to use, machinery and that. But that's where the demand is. That's where the country lacks it, and that's one of the reasons I think you don't have development in the countryside. You have too few people, who are trained to work these kinds of industries. So you need a mass expansion of vocational education in the countryside.
Okay, I'm running out of time, so I want to, if I had to ask you for 3 things, that should be the top priority. Just 1, 2, 3. That's all I can, I think, get within the next 2 minutes. Starting with you, maybe.
3 things. I think a focus on jobs, I think is absolutely essential because, I think tens of millions of educated underemployed voted for Narendra Modi because they believe he's more likely to get them jobs and careers than anybody else, but they need to see action on that. I think a sort of a healing touch in terms of the type of rhetoric that's coming out. And I think rural distress clearly was one of the issues bubbling under during this campaign. It didn't quite get the salience that it might have got, largely because Congress wasn't able to keep the messaging on that issue. But there clearly needs to be a focus on how to make sure that farmers are getting better prices for their crops.
Right. 3 quick points.
Good governance, inclusive development, and improving farm incomes.
Farm incomes. Not this side.
I think first of all, cleaning up the banking system so that the cost of credit goes down. The government has gone halfway to sorting out non-profitable assets, and more needs to be done. They have to consolidate the PSU banks and sell them and improve the banking structure because the cost of capital is very high in India. That will speed up growth. That will solve the growth problem. But secondly, I think the education thing is very important. There has been initiative on skills, but you need more initiative on skill-based education. And lastly, health. I think the Ayushman Bharat thing has started. You have to complete that health revolution, especially the public health revolution, because that touches everybody's life. And if we could do the public health revolution, that'd be fantastic.
Walter Anderson.
Investment money is needed, and so they have to sort of devise ways to get money. And there's a lot of money lying in India where they somehow have to sort of attract it out and into productive investment. That's one. The other thing is environment. This country faces an environmental disaster unless it begins to take certain steps. And that's, I didn't hear much of anything in the campaign, but there's got to be a focus on that. And there are things the government can do. And the other thing is jobs, which has a linkage, as you mentioned, to the whole issue of education. You need a more practical education in this country. The educational system in this country does not suit the needs of this country.
Right. Hope the government's taking note, the new government. Thank you all, and we are completely out of time here, but thank you. It was very nice to have all of you on this show. Thanks for watching.